Hey, all you badasses out there. We're going to talk about in-season play on the fourth episode of BadAzz Sessions coming at you right now. Hey, I hope y'all are doing good out there, and I hope you had a successful draft. If you've already, I'm certain, completed all your drafts. Seeing we've got the baseball season started, but keep in mind you can still join. You can join leagues. I think the drafts are available, I know, in Yahoo up to June, something like mid-June, early June. So even if you missed out on the action thus far, remember each season you can still join a league after the season begins. So we're going to start going through this final installment of the BadAzz Sessions that talks strictly about in-season play and is designed primarily for those who, let me tilt this a little bit, for those who are generally not really have a lot of experience in fantasy baseball or are completely brand new. So if you've had your draft, you've got your roster together, you've already started gameplay in week one, which like in Yahoo and many of the other the large platforms to play fantasy baseball on, this is a long week, meaning it's going to go, it's just always a long week. Week 1, week 15 are long weeks during the fantasy baseball year. Otherwise, we'll get into that more later. But we're going to go to a screen. We're going to go to a screen capture view, and I'm going to go away. For those of you who are watching this on video, I'm going to break away and go to a screenshot so we can walk through BadAzz Session Episode 4 on in-season play. If you're listening on audio, you can go to our website and look at the same slides that we're walking through on this this video version of the segment. So you can go to www.badazzsports.com, BadAzz being with 2 Z's. Go there and you'll find BadAzz Session slides 1 through 4. And if you go to episode 4, you can just follow right along with those slides as well if you're in an audio format, so you can still get this visual effect of what I'm talking about from slide to slide or what have you. So we're going to go, whoops, wrong screen. There we go. Okay, so in-season play is an interesting, is the long road. I think we've said in other sessions how long the season is. It's a 6-month season, and oftentimes it seems similar on paper to football until you figure out the immense number of games that you're playing in when you do that format. I mean, when you're playing baseball, you're playing tons of games, 162. So, and it's like every day, as you've probably already witnessed out there in your playing time already, of just how this goes. So as soon as I'm trying to get set up here, because my production team is me, myself, and I, as you know. So I'm trying to get these multiple windows like opened and closed and moved around so I can actually provide the information that I intend to provide you. So, and that's my lovely cat there. She's a complainer. She is a complainer. So, okay, let me get set up here for some reason. Okay, it's a little difficult for me today. All right, understanding your league rules and scoring is really important. If you did not do this prior to joining your league, or you just haven't taken the time to go in there and double check and really look at your league rules and scoring with respect to your league, so you understand how the scoring works and how that affects, so you can affect your strategy, and if you know your scoring. Most season-long baseball formats, each scoring week starts on a Monday and ends on a Sunday. Of course, this week being the exception, because we had opening day of 2023 started on Thursday. So the first week of competition in fantasy baseball and most typical formats and platforms out there, CBS, ESPN, Yahoo, and on, they will start on Thursday and end on a week from the first, that Sunday. So it's about a 10-week competition versus 7. Now that you draft your team, it's time to celebrate the walk to the championship, right? Well, not yet. Not yet exactly. Now, the fantasy baseball season, as I said, is long and grueling, and any other fantasy sports seasons out there. The standard Yahoo leagues have typically a 21, anywhere from 20 to 25 week regular season, and followed by 3 weeks of playoffs. And again, it would seem somewhat similar to a 17-week fantasy football season, but there's just so many games in a single day, each day. So understanding your league rules in season play and scoring is important. You can look this up on the Yahoo Fantasy page in the header. In standard Yahoo leagues, they normally use what's called 5x5 scoring. Translation to English, the scoring consists of 5 batting categories and 5 pitching categories. I know this may sound very simplistic, but for somebody who's beginning and have never played, obviously that don't always make a whole lot of sense. Okay, standard batting categories are runs, home runs, RBIs, stolen bases, and batting average. And you see more and more all the time that a lot of formats are replacing batting average with things like OBP or OPS or what have you. But the standard is still has batting average in it. That's your 5 batting categories. Your 5 pitching categories are wins, saves, strikeouts, earned run average, and WHIP. WHIP is walks plus hits divided by the innings pitched. ERA is a reflection of the earned runs that a pitcher gives up in a 9-inning span of time. So every 9 innings, the earned run average is X. Scoring is kept up to date continually on Yahoo, showing your matchup each week. Scoring is in standard leagues begins again on Monday and ends on Sunday. In 5x5 category scoring, you get a win for each category that you beat your opponent for that current week. So you can win a maximum of 10 wins each week of competition in Yahoo Fantasy Baseball in head-to-head competition. So if you're in a head-to-head league, there's a couple different scoring, but the standard scoring is that you have a potential of getting 1 win for each category of the 10 that you win. Win, lose, or tie. So your record will always have three categories: wins, losses, ties, in that order. So there's all kinds of examples of what kind of possibilities could happen during a week of competition in season in fantasy baseball, but essentially you could end up with a maximum of 10 wins and 0 losses, to the other extreme of 0 wins and 10 losses, and anything in between that with any amount of ties or what have you. So in a single week of competition head-to-head, the best that you can do is 10-0. But that's like winning 10 games in your baseball season. Okay? So keep that in mind. So each category is important. and I think I can make this note in case I don't mention it later. I don't know how many times I hear people in fantasy baseball talk about like disregarding or just giving up on a category when they're in their draft strategy as a strategy. I've never had that strategy. My strategy has never involved for just not trying in it, just basically punting a category. I'm not. I don't do that. Period. And you don't have to do that either to be a really good fantasy baseball player. So compete for all categories because each one of them constitute a win during a week of competition. There's much more to get into with scoring and in season, even in week strategies, but we'll go over that later. For now, you should just have a good idea about what's going on with the scoring. Okay, before we go to the waiver wire, let me hold on. Oops. I'm going the wrong way, folks. On a one-way road. Okay, so I'm going to break to the next screen for those of you who are watching on the video. I'm going to swap it over to the Yahoo screen so we can actually look at what we're talking about with league scoring and rules. So we'll go to this. Oops. Okay. And we'll go right here. Let me get the screen spread out a little bit so you can see better. Okay, so we go to league. Oops, wrong place. Okay, league overview. Oops, wrong. Let's go to baseball overview. Okay, as you can see, this is being filmed during the first week of competition. Okay, so we'll go to research. Now, let's go. So when you go to your overview page, your overview screen of baseball 23, if you look in the header on Yahoo, you can go to where we're at right now. For those of you who are listening in audio, we are at the Yahoo Fantasy Baseball site, and we're on the overview page. So if you go to Yahoo, and you should be already signed up now. If you went through the other sessions, you've already got a profile set up. You've already done all these other steps. If you haven't, pause this, go back to the previous episodes that you've not seen yet. Go back there and watch that stuff so you can catch up, and then you can fit right into where we're at right now, where we're talking about. So those of you watching on video, you can see that the header up top here, you see Yahoo Fantasy, and then you see Baseball 23, and then you see your league, and you click Overview, and this is this is a Friends and Family league that I'm in. It's the only one Friends and Family league I'm in with my brother. This is actually the league. Have you seen my baseball? Is the first league I ever started playing fantasy baseball. This is with a bunch of guys that are really, really good. They follow baseball, and they're highly competitive bunch of guys. It's a really fun league. It's not your typical friends and family league where it's like, you can dominate Uncle Joe or something, because he's over there sleeping when he should be picking up players and setting his roster. These guys really play and play hard. So anyway, so once you're in the league page, and so you go to league. Okay, and then, my bad. Go back to league, go to league, and go to settings. So you go to league and go to settings. As soon as you go to, again, league and then settings, at the bottom of that, you go to the header, league, go to the bottom of that league header to settings, and it'll immediately pop you up in the league that you're in at that time. And it's different with each league you're in. So it'd be a good idea to make sure you open this up for each one of your leagues and make sure there's not a difference. This is generally a standard league. I think they make a couple changes, I know, in this league with the we'll get to it here in a minute. They have a category change. So when you look at your league, basically you see all the basic information about your league. It's listed right there: ID, name, logo, blah blah blah. But where it gets down here is where it just starts talking about, okay, your number of teams, your head-to-head, that's the type of league. And then you get into things you want to just briefly look over. Maximum acquisitions for the season, that's usually no maximum. Maximum trades, no maximum in this case. And then right here in each league, the default is August 10th, but the trade deadline for fantasy baseball in Yahoo is the default is August 10th. Allow draft pick trades? No. You can see where you can do that, and I haven't been in a league that does that, but I guess you could trade picks during your draft. But anyway, here we get the waiver information that's always important. Your waiver time is 2 days. That means if somebody drops somebody off their roster now, they have to remain on the waiver. They have to remain on the waiver wire for 2 full days before they can be. Someone can have a shot at picking them up. Now, everybody else, which is really important, as soon as that draft's over and this season's already started, if they have not been waived by another player, they're just a free agent. They're able to pick up live right now. When you do a waiver, and this is waiver type, is how they organize the waiver priorities. And this is, in this case, a continual rolling list. So in our league, that's standard too. And what that means is in this league, if I put let's say, okay, I think, let me go back. After you do your draft, which all of you pretty much have done that, if you picked like first in your draft, your continual rolling list will put you, I believe, at the 12th priority, the last priority. And if you pick last, like 12th in your draft, then you'll be the number 1 waiver priority. And you may have already crossed this bridge and tried to make some pickups and found you didn't get somebody or what have you. But that's because there is a rolling list of priority based on whoever had the last pick. Once it starts, the waiver pickups, if you're the number 1 or whatever, you're the top priority that puts a waiver claim in for a player, you'll get priority on that if everything else is equal. The key thing is that they have a budget in some of these leagues, and in this case, there is a budget. It's a budget of $100, and that's called a fab budget. So you have and that's comes with this standard continual rolling list. Here this is pretty standard, but if you ever played in a league that allowed injured players to be picked up off waivers directly to your roster, then this would say yes. And standard is no. And what that means is you cannot just go to the waiver wire and pick up somebody on the IL and place them directly on the IL. You actually have to have either a free roster slot on your roster or drop somebody. FYI. You got trade review. So all trades in this league in particular, and this is a standard default, is the league votes. That means all the people, all the managers, fantasy managers in your league, if you propose a trade with another player, another opponent in your league, and you both agree on it, the trade, then it has to be voted on by the league before it goes through. Some people like that. Some people hate that. But, hey, if it's part of your rules, you got to live with it. So I think that's to avoid some real obvious shitty trades or something, or somebody's trying to square their cousin away or something, and that pretty much eliminates that. Now, is there overkill where people just look at a trade and they don't like that trade with the person or whatever? Sometimes they'll just vote against it. So hard to get trades through in this kind of format, and I honestly don't really, I've done trades. I've done some big trades, but I don't do them very often. The votes required to veto is default, so that means 1, and you're done. Somebody vetoes the trade. You have 2 days to review trades. So even if you make a trade and both you guys agree on it, the soonest you're going to pick up that player's 2 days afterwards. So it says here your max, and this is another default, max acquisitions per week, 6. And that's important to know too, because that's each week you can pick up, if you're streaming pitchers or you have someone that gets injured and you need to replace them off the waiver wire. This just caps your ability to make waiver transactions to 6 each week, which is usually more, enough till you get late in the season maybe and you get into playoffs, but that's still usually enough. Your minimum innings pitched per week. This is interesting. They changed this in this league. The default is 20. So I probably should go to the default one clearly to make sure we don't. But in this Friends and Family League, they make the minimum innings pitched to be 7. And, Okay, scoring. Okay, here too, they list the playoff structure. Standard is a 6-team and a 12-team with 3 weeks of playoffs and byes going to the first and second seed during the regular season. Playoff tiebreaker. Trust me, this may seem very rare, and I thought it was too, but there is a tiebreaker in case there's an absolute tie. And that tiebreaker in this case is the higher seed wins. That's the default. Let me tell you how that came into play. In one of my leagues last year, in the championship game, I actually finished in an absolute 5-5 tie for the championship. In this league right here, this Friends and Family League, I finished in an absolute 5-5 locked up tie. And he took the championship because of his higher seed. So, there's that. In this case, there's no playoff reseeding, but that's more important later anyway. That's usually reseeding sometimes happens, so check that when you get late in the season. Okay, and then down to bottom is your roster positions, which you should already be aware of, but particularly for end season, pay attention to how many IL slots here that your league allows, and in this case, it's standard 4. And then double check your batter and pitcher categories. See, in this case, this was all absolutely standard, except this league decided to replace batting average with on-base percentage. That's really important to know sometimes because different players are different levels of performance based on the format. So there we have it. And that's the scoring page, and that's pretty much it. As a matter of fact, let me go to the other list and just quickly of another league and just let's go to this one and let's go to settings and let's review for differences. This is really totally standard here. Let's check out the differences. Okay. Looks like we have, in this case, see again, we went down to minimum innings pitched per team per week. Standard is 20. So what that means is you have to have, of all your pitchers combined in the competition week that you're in, you have to pitch a minimum of 20 innings. You have to, or you basically default all 5 of those pitching categories. So you can't just short pitch a few relievers during the week, get saves, ERA, and WHIP, and call it a day. Some people try that strategy, but that's why these minimum innings are put into the rules to kind of hinder some of that. This is a higher seed wins again. Playoff reseeding. Now, in the previous league, they don't have reseeding. In this case, playoff reseeding in default they do reseed. And that just simply means, they reseed to the regular season, wherever you finish your regular season. The higher the seed obviously plays the lowest seed of those remaining in the playoffs. So versus just setting it like a bracket and playing through a static bracket. They reseed highest against lowest seed each round. Some teams have divisions, most don't. They're default. And here again is a listing of all your player slots for bench, for IL. Again, notice the difference here. Batting average is here instead of on-base percentage in the other league. Everything else is the same as standard. So there you have it. So there's that. Fun. Okay. So let's go back to where we were. Where were we? Okay. So that's your scoring. If you have not checked that out yet, do it. Because you want to make sure. Don't just assume that, I think it's this. Because that scoring's important with your in-season strategy as well. So, that was slow. Okay, I'm trying to set this so we're centered here. So it looks a little better maybe. There we go. And let me move this down a little bit. Bear with me, folks. This production team is 3. Me. There we go. Now we got set. Now we're set. Okay. Now the waiver wires. I've said before, and I'll say it again. And again, if you're just jumping on this and you don't know, we do this BadAzz sessions on video on YouTube, and we have it on audio platforms on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And you can also find these sessions on our website at badazzsports.com, BadAzz having 2 Z's. So we're at the waiver wire where I've said it many times. The waiver wire is the arena, or that's the place where champions are made. Fantasy managers who learn the waiver wire are almost always in the playoffs and often find themselves in the championship round. Throughout the season, one thing that never changes about baseball is its ebbs and flows, ups and downs, hot and cold streaks. Understanding this will equip you with a clear picture of just how the waiver wire can definitely be your friend. The waiver wire is born each season, immediately following the draft. It consists of all free agents available after the draft and those who are placed on waivers by your opponents or yourself. In the Yahoo Standard leagues, you've got 6 waiver wire transactions per week, as I told you before, in default settings, scoring settings, and league settings. With these waiver wire transactions, you can add players to your team while dropping current players on your roster who are not performing. Learning how to do this effectively is important to becoming a consistently high-level player. For instance, in 2022, I landed Julio Rodriguez, Spencer Strider, Jose Miranda, Bobby Witt Jr., and more to my rosters. And these players became difference makers for not just my team, but many teams across the fantasy baseball universe. All these guys coming off the waiver wire last year. An average season for me, for the number of moves that I make on the waiver wire, is between 70 and 90. I know that sounds like a shitload of moves. It seems like ridiculous. Like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm almost always on the top of my leagues in the number of moves. Now, that's not something I strive to do. It's just a matter of the reality of how I play. I'm very active on the waiver wire and always have been. I encourage you, if you want to become a champion and be really competitive in fantasy baseball, that you become very active on the waiver wire. Viewing the waiver wire, you'll find numerous ways to filter, sort, display player information. You should practice going over this page and getting used to changing data around and navigating across its many different layouts. You can select favorites, and this adds that player to your watch list so you can follow certain players throughout the season. That's important. There's a way to view the waiver wire that is sorted by transaction trends. These trends show you who is popular on the waiver wire by other players out there, other managers. There are tools in Yahoo where you can do one-on-one player comparisons, see how one of your players stacks up against a free agent on the waiver wire. And on Yahoo and most platforms, these tools are absolutely free. Depending on the league that you're in and their rules with waiver wire transactions, as we covered just before here, you will need to know this before your season starts, which we covered that. Most standard leagues have first come, first served priority system or a blind bid process for acquiring players from the waiver wire. First come, first serve is basically wide open. If there's a player available on the waiver wire, anyone can pick them up immediately. A priority system could be one that places waiver priority to the lowest seeded team bidding on the player, or one based upon a priority to the team with the longest time frame since the last waiver wire transaction. And that's that rolling list that we were talking about, waiver priority, the continual rolling list. That's what we're talking about. Once you pick up a waiver wire player, then you go to the back of the line, so to speak, of your 12-team league, 10-team, whatever. Many leagues use a bid system where each team is given a certain amount of fake dollars, usually 100 or 1,000. You use this, what they call FAB, which stands for Free Agent Acquisition Budget. You use that FAB throughout the season to bid on players you want to add to your team. As with most every platform, they have specific timelines for submitting a waiver claim, so know the specific rules of your league because it's crucial for your long-term success. In standard 12-team Yahoo leagues, you are allotted, as I said before, 6 waiver wire transactions per week throughout the season. That's each week, all throughout the season. So don't feel bad if your draft wasn't the best. The waiver wire can be your edge because that's where champions reign. The waiver wire is a place to be active in your season-long league. In 2022, my season-long league average for moves on the waiver wire was 75, as opposed to my opponent's average of 40.5 moves during the season. Remember, I've said before that you don't normally win a league based solely on your draft. This is where the waiver wire comes in. For example, in my 23-player leagues, that's the roster size, 23 players on my roster, I average 14 batters and 9 pitchers to make up, on average, that 23-player roster. Of those 23 I drafted, 14 batters, 9 pitchers. I averaged 7 batters and 4 pitchers that still remained on my roster at the end of the season. So I averaged 7 batters of the 14 and 4 pitchers of my 9 that I drafted, that I retained it by the end of the year that I still had on my roster. So this basically emphasizes to me clearly the balance between both the draft and your use of the waiver wire as two of the most critical elements to implement in your fantasy baseball strategy. The free agent acquisition budget, or FAB, as most people call it. Some people just call it it can be an acronym of FAAB, free agent acquisition budget, or it could be acronym FAB, just free agent budget, what have you. But it's FAB. Everybody calls it FAB. That's your budget, your money that's given to you, fake money, to have a budget to bid on players on the waiver wire. You only get that amount once for the whole year. Once it's gone, it's gone. So use it frugally. Whatever you call it, it's fake money, and it's used to acquire free agents, and many leagues are set up this way. Most of them that I'm in do that as well. Some of them have no FAB at all. It means first come, first serve. Whoever grabs somebody off the waiver wire, they got them. Most leagues implement a FAB system to kind of, I guess their theory is to make it fair, but I have a different opinion on that. Some are set up for daily bids. Some are weekly bid periods. And what the difference is there is when you're in a daily which the default league is really set up to have daily bidding, meaning every day you can put in a waiver claim for a player. In a weekly waiver period league, there's a specific day of the week, and in most cases it's Sunday. Sunday evening at a certain time is when all your bids and your waiver bids go in by a certain time on, like, let's say Sunday night. Once that time goes up, whoever got the highest bid with the most the most FAB on a player, if there's a competition for one player between multiple opponents, the highest bid on that player will get that, and you would know that Sunday night, Sunday evening, or certainly by the next morning before there's any competition, that you would have that player available on your roster to use. I think if you have a choice, I think if you're a beginner and you're already past this if you pick leagues, but typically try to play in leagues to start with that are default settings and they're easy, a little bit easier to understand and follow through, and you just probably will have a little bit better success working in from the basic platforms, because these leagues can get really extravagant with special rules and money values and auctions, and it can get really complex. So I really advocate just getting in a basic standard league. When you there's also leagues that have where you can also put in $0 bids, or that's prohibited. And what that simply means is what it says. You cannot bid in and not bid any FAB, any of your money to get a player. Now, most of the leagues I'm in, they're not set up like that. You can do a 0 bid. And what that means is you can go in and bid on a waiver wire player, try to acquire him, select him for a waiver acquisition without putting any money on it. Now, if somebody bids $1 or more on that same player during that same waiver day or waiver week period, if they put the same amount of money in it, or the more money, they get it. If it's the exact same bid, then it would go to whoever has priority based on your league standings, league settings, whether it would be the lower seed at the time of the waiver pickup would get that tie bid, or it would be that continual rolling list depending on who has had the most recent waiver wire transactions. So check your league settings and make sure you understand which of those you fall in so you can work the waiver wire with effectiveness. I think when you get into really complex situations, you can get into leagues where they play for a lot of money, like the NFBC, where they have those 15-team leagues, and they're very competitive with their fab and what happens is the fab system can get crazy too, because you can have a wasteland at the start of a year, maybe once the waiver wire's kind of been bleeded of anybody that's probably has some value, and that only changes in the season usually when one or two things emerge. A breakout player emerges, somebody who's been playing before but is on a pace to perform much higher than their averages and their history. And then there's prospects that get called up. So when they emerge, the bidding can be quite fierce on players like that. So I think it's just be somewhat conservative when you first start out and see, and you may lose out on some players because of that, but you also won't make some really, really bad mistakes and blow some of your budget, too much of it early. And then when you get down to the stretch run and you really need to bid on some players to win some playoff games, you have no money left. We'll talk about that throughout the season, though. So as I said before, in the standard Yahoo leagues, the fab is usually $100. They give you and allow you to have $0 bids. So if you play your money right, you'll have some later in the season. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to quickly, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, and those of you listening on audio, what we're going to do is we're going to go to, we're going to hit the waiver wire, and I'm going to show you, well, right here, if I can pull it up here. Here we go. Okay, so let's see what league I'm in here. I don't even know what league I'm in here. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, for those listening on audio, I'm at the Yahoo Fantasy site. I'm at the league overview, and then I went to the header and went to players, and then I go to player list. Once you go to that, that's essentially your waiver wire list. What they typically show is here's where you can adjust this, and it looks quite different on the mobile app, but it's really functionally the same. And you'll want to, like, you can go into live. You can go into you can filter it for averages, just about really anything you can think of here. I mean, hold on. Let me go back here. I think I'm off track here. Okay, let me go back to overview. And okay, this is a public league. Let me back out of here for just a minute and get into the right league here. Okay, let me get in this friends and family league and look at the waiver wire. All right, again, we go to players list. Okay, again, this is where you can go in and filter the information that you need, the time frame that you want to look at. Let's say a lot of times, it's so early in the season, but a lot of times I'll go in and look at a 30-day total or even a short term. And I know some fantasy players out there say they don't feel like a last 7 days has any value of indicating how a player's going to perform maybe the next 7 days. But I disagree, because baseball, again, ebbs and flows, hot and cold streaks. And if you can catch somebody in the last 7 days that's got a hot bat, or catch somebody in the last 7 days that's pitched an outstanding a turn in their rotation, it's somebody you should at least put on your radar. Okay, so again, Yahoo has a lot of analysis help, and I don't always use some of it, but I do glance at it, and it talks about here strengths and weaknesses, and you can go to research assistants and get help on comparing some players that you have with others that may be available out there that you might consider picking up over the player that you have on your roster currently. So those are suggestions, or some guidance anyway. Okay, here is a roster percentage, the percentage that players that are on the waiver wire are actually rostered on other teams all throughout the platform, the Yahoo Fantasy. So I think that's something to look at for trends and stuff. And certainly we'll talk about people that are waiver eligible. When we talk about those during the season, when I give you suggestions on some players to pick up or what have you, there'll always be people that are less than 70% owned in the in leagues, in the Yahoo leagues. So any of these players here that are under 70%, if they're playing well, are potential pickups for you. Here's your roster status. FA stands for free agent, so they're available for a waiver wire claim immediately. When you see a W and a date, that means they're on a waiver, that 2-day waiting period, because someone has had them on their roster and dropped them, placed them back on the waiver wire. That's why there's a waiting period. Everybody else, and after that waiting period, then if they haven't been picked up, then they become unrestricted free agents basically. So good info. You even have current rankings, so you can glance really quick, and that's the order that these players are listed in as far as their fantasy performance ranking right now for the season. Like Trace Thompson is the number 2 fantasy player in all fantasy right now. When he had that one big game, I think he had 3 home runs in that game. Yeah, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs. You can look at their season statistics, and you can do a lot of research from right during this page. Let's say, in this instance, Trace Thompson, I needed an outfielder, or I was anticipating that I might need an outfielder, or I have an injured player that's an outfielder or whatever. Then I would simply go up here to the position, and I just simply go to outfield, and it's gonna push it down. Okay, and this is the last 7 days of action, which is really the whole season thus far, because we haven't even been played 7 days yet. But there's the rankings right here, so you can tell who's hot, the percentage of rostered that player is, and these are some really low percentages, but there's a position rank if that's interesting to you, and then they're basically line scores, their stats. So here's all the outfielders available, and you can go, this is next 25, and it goes on and on. You see, next 25, next 25. Then we can go back to where we were, top of the list, and you can go through that list and see what kind of players are available. And if you want to add them on a waiver transaction, you just click add player. And then it's going to go to your roster. And if you have to drop a player because you don't have an open roster slot, then that's where you select that player from your roster. And then that completes the waiver wire transactions. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If you have an open roster slot, you'll just simply add them. You'll click add here, and it'll go to your roster and say add player. Click it, boom, they're on your roster. Simple as that. I use this during season favorites. You'll see these stars in the far left corner here. These are people that I want to target, through the year for whatever reason. I might get some information from my analytics department. And that's, again, if you haven't watched other BadAzz sessions or checked out any of our specials on drafting and all that, then you'll know that that's a huge aspect of how I plan. And when I hear of good players from my analytics department, or I do some research, or I'm just observing baseball games and see some players that are piqued my interest, and either by performance or some of their potential, I'll put them on my watch list. So, and you'll see there's some players on here. What that does is it can make me shorten my list real quick and look at how some players are doing. So see, you can go to, if you're on audio, I am on Yahoo Fantasy. I went to my league overview, clicked on my league, went to players, the player header at the top. Click on that, go to players list, and you're at your list of who your free agents for your waiver wire that are available. And this, as it says here, status, all available players. That's everybody that's not on a roster in your league. Now I'm going to change that to my watch list right here by going to status and changing the status, and then clicking filter. Now that's my watch list. I don't know how many I have, but it's less than 25, but I just throw names on there that I hear and I want to watch. And in this case, these are already rostered, so I'm going to unclick those because I've already picked those up. Those are two players right there I've already picked up in the first week and off my watch list. So let me filter that again. Okay, and those people are removed. So here we have a watch list. What you can do with this watch list too is just, like I said, follow certain players, see how they're doing, so you can see their stats. I see that Mateo, that's on my watch list in this league, is off to a pretty doggone good start, and he's only rostered in 36%. So he scored 3 runs, 2 RBIs, and has had 4 stolen bases already. I mean, they've only played, I think, 4 games so far. So, yeah, if you need stolen bases, that cat right there would be a candidate. But anyway, this is my watch list. And let me show you something else you can do in season. So again, we're on my watch list. If you're following on audio, under status, when you're at your waiver wire page, under status, I at first it's listed by default all available players, but you want to change that status and click on it. Once you've clicked a star in the left column of a player that you like or players, then go back up and filter and check that out to my watch list, and then click filter, the blue filter button. And then all the people who you have selected and click that little star, that little blue star, they'll show up on your watch list. Now, what you can further do that I like to do is to the right of where you filter your list, it says status, and then position. You can pick either batters, pitchers, or specific positions on your roster to look at the list. And then your status is how many days or what time frame are you looking at data. Now to the next one to the right is a checkbox, and it says show my team. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to filter it. And why I do that is because now I'm looking at my watch list and have included my current players on my roster to see. And I always like to look at that because I look at, okay, are there people on the free agent market that are performing better than my drafted players? And of course there's going to be some, because again, baseball is a very up and down, a very hot, cold, ebb and flow sport. And even the greatest players have their dips. But as you can see here, my team right here, it says roster status on the waiver list. It says batters and then opponent, which is who they're currently playing or getting ready to play, and then roster status. And you'll see this is my team name, Moonlight Graham's Nuts. So everywhere you see that, then they're already on my team. And you see Jorge Mateo is ranked higher than any player I have on my roster right now in the last 7 days. Now, again, that's hot and cold. Next week, he may not be anywhere on this list to be found. And you like to see your players up here. You obviously don't want to see a lot of free agents above your players that you selected. So you hope you have people that are playing at a level. And, of course, I do right now have some people that are really hot right now playing, and they'll show up towards the top of this list. And then, again, you can see free agents scattered throughout my roster that are performing at a higher level than some of my players. So it's a really good to me throughout the year as the weeks go on and more data starts getting accumulated. This will become a very useful, I think, in checking the progress in season of your team. And identify really quickly some needs, some places where you've got people outperforming your certain positions on your roster. So, there you have it. And that's how I basically do it. Now, you can do this as well. You can change the status and go back to all players. So, in this case, we're going to filter it. We're going to show all batters that are available. And I'm showing my team. So, now it's not just the watch list. I can get a real look at who's got who. Who has, wait a minute, in this case, let me go back to, all available players. My bad. I put all players so it had all the teams in my league and the current rankings of how they're playing. So here I'm going with my roster against all free agents that are available. And as you can see, there's 4 players here that at least in the first 4 games of the season have played above my best performing players right here, these 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you got 3 of my players. And then you got a bunch of other that have got out of the gates pretty quick. As when you look down further, you'll see, like I said, the players, when you show your team, when you click show my team in the checkbox on the waiver view on that player list, you'll see your team, the players that are currently on your team and the players that are available. And like I said, it's a very good, in my opinion, a very good look. Plus, you can tell who's really like kind of slumping too, or at least getting out of the gate slow. And you can see these guys got a little bit slow out of the gate here. Not bad, but, and you're always going to have players like that. So I have 3 players that are kind of getting out of the gates a little slow. But I know Austin Riley, Michael Harris are not going to stay in that situation. Because, again, it's baseball, and baseball ebbs and flows. So let's go back to our slides. Now, I hope that was helpful in kind of showing you a little bit of how to maneuver and how to go through the waiver process, at least initially, in how to analyze information before you actually try to pick up a player. But let me go back to that just a second. I did want to show you this. Let's say we did pick up a player. I can't click all the way through this because it will actually add them. But if I did want to add Trace Thompson, I decided after my research that I needed another outfielder. I would click. For those of you listening on audio, you would go just to the right of the name that you wanted to select, and you'll see a plus sign. And you'll go to that plus sign, and it'll say Add Player, and you'll click Add Player. And then for those looking at video, on the video version, you can see that it brings up the player's basic profile and information at the top, and it'll say Player to Add, and here's his information again. And then you scroll down below and it says select a player to drop. Now remember, I told you if I have a player, a roster spot empty, meaning I don't have all 23 roster slots filled on my team, I can just add. This would not say select a player to drop. So when you drop that player, I think I wanted to click another one, but I'm afraid I can't remember if I click on this. I think there's still another one more ask of this before it actually does it. But I'm not going to click on it. But if you go from here, this point, you've already selected your player, and it'll say player to add. Below, select a player to drop. Pretty simple. And then you pick your player. Make sure that you do the right one. Don't fuck that up. And click on that, whoever you're going to drop to add that player. And then that's about as simple as it can be right there. And that's how you add a player off the waiver wire. Assessing your team in season is a continuing endeavor if you're going to be competitive. You can't just sit on your draft and just wait 2 months and figure it out, because each week that you play in these 20 to 25 weeks is important. You're winning and losing games by tens every week. And as competitive as fantasy baseball is, if you're not coming out of the chutes being competitive, you may find, and oftentimes find yourself so far behind that catching up is super difficult late in the season. So come out of the chutes with a winning and active attitude and be consistent throughout the year, and that will help you attain a high winning percentage, and you'll get your wins and your championships as long as you're playing at a high level consistently with respect to winning percentage. So in-season assessment of your team's vital to winning a championship. The more frequently you assess your team throughout the season, the better your team will be at the end of the season. Pretty damn simple. Yahoo, for instance, has tools that allows you to assess your team and do comparisons with other players, as we just kind of showed, that are available on the waiver wire. While your roster construction after your draft may have looked good in April, you may have to make some changes in May. Looking over your roster and trying to find that balance where you're putting the best scoring you can for the most categories in your head-to-head standard league, that's your goal. I don't think there's hard rules to how many players in each position that you have as far as your roster construction. In the past seasons, I've had rosters where I've carried more starting pitchers and only maybe 2 batters on the bench. This year, my plan was and is to have my roster construction's changed a little bit in strategy. This season, I decided to go with in some cases 4 batters on my bench. I decided to only roll with 5 starting pitchers and 3 relief pitchers in some leagues. My objective in that strategy this season was to have a strong counting stats with my batters, meaning I can count on them to produce numbers consistently throughout the year. and be very strong in the hitter categories and really focus my efforts on having a powerful hitting lineup. And then typically run either a shorter starting pitching staff or a pitching staff that I drafted a lot later than other teams. So I use my ability to do research and analysis throughout the year to make up for those lower priorities for pitching in the draft by streaming pitchers throughout the season. And that's been my winning combination throughout the years. So this year's no different. Focus on that top half that draft and really power down on batters and make sure you have a strong batting lineup. But that's my strategy. It may not be yours. Maybe you love pitching more and you want to take the top, get as best pitching rotation that you can. And for that, then obviously you may suffer a little bit. You know, it's give and take in drafting and roster construction where you give to one, you take away from the other. So you got to find that balance. During the 2022 season, I tracked all 5x5 categories, plus at-bats, total at-bats, and total innings pitched. By doing this each week, I was able to establish a baseline for my team assessments. Here are my average scores and stats for the season across all of my head-to-head teams last season. At-bats, all these are 6 categories, 5 of which are scored for fantasy competition, 5x5 categories. At-bats is just a stat I track that's on your scoring page, on your matchup page. When you go into Yahoo Fantasy and you go check out your matchup and click on it, and then you see the team you're playing, the opponent, and your roster. And then you'll see these categories listed. Above the batting categories is at-bats, your at-bat total. So I track that too to see how many at-bats I'm getting each week from my batters. Obviously, I want that number to be higher than lower. The average last year for a week I had was 245 at-bats. Now, I would not use these base stats if the season I just had sucked. But last year's, I had a .64 something win percentage. So I had a really good year, my second best year ever. So those foundational stats, as far as averages, is what I want to capture as a baseline to start my season, to do my assessments in season. The only reason these numbers may need to be manipulated and changed in any way is if your categories change or something within the category, something changes that makes those numbers, would skew those numbers. But all this has been pretty much across the board every year. So these numbers are good research. And a good place to start for setting up your strategy for assessing your team within the season. 245 at-bats a week. That's my baseline. Average runs a week, 34. Average home runs a week, 11. RBIs, 34. Stolen bases, 7. Batting average, 248. Yeah, that don't sound too good, does it? Anyway, on the pitching side, innings pitched. Average a week, 53 innings. Wins, 3.2. Saves, 2.6. Strikeouts, 51. ERA, 3.66. WHIP, 1.22. So those are my baselines based on averages within all my teams last year that I competed in. So let me go. Hold on. Let me go back. Go back. Where you at? Hello. Oh, there we go. Now I went too far back. Jesus Christ. Okay. This thing is a little slow here, I guess, for some. Okay, so let's go to what I want to show you is how I track this in season. So last year and years before, I would just simply take a notebook for the most part and draw out a chart with those 10 categories on the left column, and at the top horizontal at the rows, the row headings, I would have my teams. My weeks during the season, and then the categories down the left columns would be the headers for my columns, and then I'd track every week of my team's scoring, and then keep an average so I can assess whether I'm performing at a level in each category that's good enough. And it's a great tool to highlight clearly where you're lacking on your roster, where you're not performing as well. And to me, it's an easy assessment tool. So what's this look like? Well, we're going to exit the slides. And if you're listening to this on audio, but on my website looking at the slides, we're at the slide where it's the heading is Assessing Your Team in Season. Assessing your team in season. Now we're going to depart from this just a minute and we're going to go to the tool that I use to track my team performance during the year. So we're going to cue this up here. Well, here we go. Sweet. All right. Well, that's the wrong view. That is obviously my draft tiers list. Oh, there we go. Okay. For those of you watching on the video portion, you'll see charts came up, and this is simply in the Numbers app on Mac, and basically it's like Excel. I'm not a high-tech person, but it's the same thing basically. It's the same thing as a doggone spreadsheet on Excel. But so what I did was I developed, so all three of my teams, I have 3 tabs at the top. And again, if you do Excel, you know there's tabs at the top of your sheets. And I have 3 sheets here, 3 separate sheets, because I have 3 teams that I'm tracking in this file here. How I set this up here is you'll see the left-hand side, the rows are labeled by the 10 categories in your league. And then the columns are all listed weeks. And if you notice at the top of my chart, I start with week 2. And I always do that only because I kind of throw out the first week because, for one, it's a long week. So I don't want the numbers on averages to be skewed. And I could come up with some way to balance that out, whatever, and do a daily, average, and then come up with a 7-day average for the first week. But I said, nah, hell, we'll throw that out. And I throw out week 15, which is the other long week this year. So then basically, as you can see at the header, we got week 2 in the top row here to week 14. That takes us to the All-Star break. And then week 15, we're off. And then we start back at week 16. So you go down below to this other second part of this chart and see week 16 through 22 in gray. That's the regular season. 22 weeks of regular season, of which I will track 20 weeks specifically, because we're taking off that long week in week 1 and taking off the long week in week 15. And then in blue in the header, you see week 23, 24, and 25. These are the playoffs. So I just color them different just to have that distinction. Now, what I did was I put some formulas and things in here so they'll add up automatically. And what I'm trying to do is here in the columns heading is what I added after the last week of that chart is I added a And I'll post this on our website too, so you can see this specific chart. So the people out there listening on audio, go to the website at badazzsports.com, BadAzz with 2 Z's, and I'll post that this category scoring chart up there for you. And if you have a Mac, I think you should be able to. I should be able to make that download where you can download it, and that way you don't even have to create it yourself if you're playing in Yahoo. So I have my 3 teams, my 3 charts, and have the rows tagged with the categories and the columns tagged with the weeks, the week of play. The next row column over from the last week is 2023 average. And that'll be a running total as I put numbers in starting week 2, 3, 4, and it'll do a running average automatically. And then the next column over is the 2022 average. That's last year. So I fixed all those numbers I just told you earlier that I did averages last year. I put those averages into the 2022 average column. Then as I go during the season, it's going to accumulate and build a 2023 average in each category. It's going to compare it automatically with the 2022 average and give me a difference. So in the far right column, I can look at really quick and see differences from last year's averages and quickly do an assessment. Probably sounds like a lot, but once you get this set up, it's simply just inputting the numbers. Like, for instance, at bats. So I have 25 at bats week 2. I know it's more than that, but you see how it's adding up already. And then I got 100 this week, whatever. And you'll see the average change for the current season. Difference between that and your average from last year. And it'll show a negative number. Now, if it would show, and that means I'm down from my average and I need more at bats. So let's say I got a lot more at bats and it becomes a positive number somehow. I'm going to have to put a lot higher number in there. Once the difference becomes positive, then it turns a color green. See that? Positive. Now it went over the differences. I'm at 20 at bats a week more than last year on average by having that information. But anyway, that's how we do it. And this chart will be handy and a lot easier than what I've done in the past where I've used just a pad of paper. But you can do that too and be just as effective. It's just I think this is much more efficient and it's easier to use for tools for you to help you. And again, we'll post that on the website and make that available to you to use. Now let's go back to our slides. Again, that's a category scoring chart there that I use. So we're going to go back to our slides. Hopefully. What the heck? Me, myself, and I. It's a 3-man production team, folks. All right, here we go. So know your opponent is important too, especially late in the year. Maybe early in the season, I don't know. Maybe you're not as meticulous into it. But I think if you really want to compete at a high level at some point during each week, you peek in and look at your opponent. And there's a lot of important things to be gained from that. But in head-to-head leagues, you're competing each week against one person. And there are ways to assess and make strategic moves to gain an advantage. For instance, in Yahoo Fantasy app, you can view the player performance rating of your opponent. You can also view your opponent's roster. Because typically you do not maintain a roster that is strong in every category, neither does your opponent. Knowing how you stack up against your opponent can assist you in making roster moves during the current week. And that's a fact. And let me just go back to that because I want to show you, instead of just talking about it, is knowing your opponent. So we're going to go back to, we're going to go, wait a minute, back to Yahoo. Okay. And this is how we're going to do this with respect to, okay, let's go into the league again. Let's go in our friends and family league thing here. We'll go into this league and we'll look at matchup. Go at the top of the header on your Yahoo Fantasy page, at your main overview page of Fantasy Baseball. You'll see the header, and at the top it says matchup. You click matchup, and that's your current week matchup. The opponent that you have, the current live scoring. And, as you can see in this one in week 1, I'm getting beat, but it's early in the week. Don't ever worry, honestly, about being behind early in the week. It's a long week, and veteran players will tell you, hey, it ebbs and flows like the game of baseball, your position. But this is where I'm at right now. If I wanted to look at prior to the I'm stuck here, prior to playing them, or while I'm playing my opponent, I might want to know before the competition even starts, who am I playing as far as performance level long term? Has this opponent been playing a long time? Is he relatively new? What's his record? How competitive, has he been in the past? And the way to do that is you go to your overview, Yahoo Fantasy Baseball Overview, Baseball 23, and then go to League, and click Overview. When you go to the league overview, you see all the teams in your league lined up, who they're playing that week, and their score. But below that, you'll see standings. To the right of standings, you'll see standings, schedule, and ratings and levels. Click on ratings and levels. So this week I am playing, this team called Now I'm a Belieber. So, and there's his name. It's Scott. So I could actually call him by name. Hey, Scott, what's up? I'm going to beat the shit out of you this week. But there's his ranking. Now, his ranking is 611. So I can click on his team and then go directly to his roster. But when I go there, I can also see at the top here his level again. He's at silver level. His rating's 611. His best finish ever, playing is silver, so currently where he's at. And this is his record and his winning percentage. Now, that doesn't mean, because he's got a 478 winning percentage, I have a much higher one that I'm, obviously he's beaten me pretty good this week. So he could be a motivated young player. And so let's go back to matchup. But that's how you can tell who you're playing, what level they are at as far as their experience and performance levels. So when we look at matchups and we're looking at our head-to-head categories as we're competing, you can see a running total here in each category and who's ahead in what. And you can do a quick assessment in season, not only in season, but in week while you're competing with that one opponent, where you stand, where you're either far behind or far ahead, can actually make differences in your roster construction throughout the remainder of the week. I mean, just an example here is really quick. You can see this is why knowing your opponent and checking your opponent is important. I like to just generally look at how they have roster construction to begin with. And in this case, this is quick to notice that he has a starting pitcher in one of his relief pitcher slots that isn't a relief pitcher, which is okay. It's cool. But he has absolutely no relief pitchers whatsoever. So I go into the week knowing for sure, unless he makes some kind of waiver transaction during the week, that I'm going to win the saves category. Right now I'm ahead 1-0. he has absolutely no pitchers on his roster currently that are in a position to qualify to get a save. So I can count that one in. And then I can look at where I'm behind, how far I'm behind in some categories, and some vary. When you're getting beat 22-9 early in RBIs, it may be early, but that's a significant difference. And in wins, being down 3 wins is significant as well, especially when if you go back and think about the my averages during the week were like 3.2 wins a week. This guy's already locked up 3 wins, so he's on a really good run right now with that. And of course, I'm dominating in stolen bases, 8-1. Which I intend to dominate in that. And then you have your other stats that aren't counting stats, like your OBP, your ERA, and your WHIP, which you should pay attention to. And you look and see how far you're ahead or behind can make a difference between an ERA and WHIP of whether you even pitch a certain pitcher that's due up in your rotation, or to stream an extra pitcher to try to make up for strikeouts or make up for wins or what have you. So this information during the week is important to track somewhat. I would at least say that you should look at your opponent by at least midweek to see where you're at with respect to scores against your opponent. At the very least, by Wednesday to look at how how the competition's going this week and what it looks like his roster's stacked to do. So anyway, he's got a shitload of people in his batter line. He's just got a crap load of batters. But anyway, that's to each their own, their strategy. Right now it's working for him. Okay, so now we'll go back to the slides here. So knowing your opponent when you're competing each week is really a way to assess and make good strategic moves to gain that advantage. So keep that in mind. Go to the next slide. I should say next slide, please. I think I just clicked it too. Okay. Did we go I think we went too far. Okay, roster moves. Utilizing third-party information data. Using and how you do using stats, rankings, projections, analytics. Using the last 7 on your waiver wire, your player list to see who's available and who's been playing well, or 14-day or month filter, whatever filter you use to assess player data in the player database in Yahoo Fantasy. Just play with that and start learning the various ways you can filter that data so you can continually track that throughout the season. That's very important. Prospects and call-ups during season. Following prospects can be as simple as listening to a podcast and hearing about them there, or following the MLB pipeline or their prospect ratings, and monitoring MLB transactions. Keep an eye on top prospects so that you're prepared during the season to hit the waiver wire and pick up the next Julio Rodriguez or Bobby Witt Jr. Really important. Again, one of the simple tools to track and maintain a good target list in season is keeping up with it, and I believe using that watch list by clicking those stars. There's a maximum. I can't remember the maximum number you can put on it on your watch list, but look, it's a big number. So if you get to that max number, then go back through and start cutting some of those bottom performers on your watch list. But maintain a watch list throughout the year, and I'm sure it'll help you pick up those really good players as they come on. Some players won't even show up on that waiver list. If they're in the minors and they've always been in the minors, there's a lot of times they may not show up until they get called up. Now that's not always the case, but a lot of times you'll see players on the waiver wire, and beside their name it'll say NA, and that'll mean that they're in the minor leagues, that they're not at this time in the major leagues. Looking for breakouts. I call them risers, but the industry pretty much calls these folks breakouts, and they're hard to forecast, and it requires some thought. They're players who are fast starters, and because baseball is an up and down proposition with hitting, you want to look for players on the waiver wire who get out of the gates fast. I do have a theory when it comes to fast starters, and I believe that all players want to go to the All-Star game at least once in their career. And those who have never been selected or voted on, I'm not talking about the guys who get added on when somebody gets injured later. I'm talking about people who get selected to be an all-star. They know they need to get off to a good, fast start to make that all-star team. Because if you're hot at the start, you have a chance to get on that team. Keep in mind last year in 2022, Taijuan Walker was a perfect example. He started out the season on fire, made the all-star team, and then he commenced to nosedive the rest of the season. And that happens more than you think. So watch for players who maybe have never made the all-star game but are on the verge of breaking out. And I think you'll see that their first half stats will be typically really high and really good because they're trying to make a run to make that all-star team. The injured list, or the IL, which once was called for a long time the DL, the disabled list. Now it's the injured list, the IL. In standard leagues, you typically have 2 to 4 IL slots available for your roster. Of course, when you have injured players, you can stash them here until they get back to active status. But if you're not using the slots, a good strategy at times can be to pick up those players on the IL available on the waiver wire and stash them. And there's examples of that already this year. There have been players on the IL, like if they did not get drafted, like Liam Hendricks, for example, he's out and he's fighting a bout of cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I picked him up in the league and then once I pick him up, I had to drop somebody. But then once I pick him up, I will put him immediately into a IL slot. And then that'll free up a slot again for me to pick up somebody on the waiver wire, an active player. But I'll be able to keep Liam Hendricks. And then if he comes back, then, I have a really good, potentially a really good closer there for nothing. I've seen players like Lance McCullers Jr., who's on the IL. Somebody picked him up and presumably did the same move. But you'll see players in your leagues that will pick up those IL players, and that's why. They're picking them up, dumping them in a spot that doesn't affect their team whatsoever, and they can just hold them there in case they come back. And you can keep them on that IL all year long. And as long as you're not using all 4 of them, I highly encourage you to go look at your waiver list, see if there's try to see who's on the IL and people that you might want to target, and then go see if they're available and see if you can pick up one of those players on the IL and do that move. Go ahead and try it. Awards, performance ratings, and after-action reviews are super important at the end of the year, and I know it's really early to be talking about the end of the year, but these are things that you establish during the season that make it easy to do that. For awards and performance ratings, when you go into, let's just go into that section. Okay, we're back. We're going to maneuver back to the, for those of you on audio, back to the Yahoo Fantasy site. We go back to the Yahoo Fantasy site, and then, hold on here. We're going to go to my profile. What you want to do is go to the header, And where it says baseball 23 in the top header there, it's one of the first headers you come to. You'll see you go down in baseball 23 and you go down to overview. It'll be the first one that comes. Overview. Oops, that wasn't it. My bad. Okay. Hold on. Overview. Blah, 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 blah. Profile. You go to profile. I'm sorry. So you go to, let me back that up. You're on the Yahoo Fantasy site. You go to the header. It says Baseball 23. That's kind of the dashboard. And you go down to Profile. Click Profile, and then you're in your individual performance profile. This is a history. It goes back all the way to 2009. And all sports and all competition in Yahoo that you compete in, I believe it tracks it all. But what I pay attention to right here is baseball, fantasy baseball. Here's our performance level. And if this is important to you, how well you play against your competition and how well you do, then you'll want to apply all your fantasy baseball strategies that we talk about, but also know that each week is important. So compete at a high level each week, and you should see your performance go up measurably. So this lets you know where you're at, and it's a running total during the year too. You can move up and down your various category levels based on how well you play each week. The levels, performance levels, are from the top down: diamond level, platinum level, gold level, silver, and bronze level. So you move up through those levels based on your performance, not only just this current year, but in previous years as well. So it takes into account an algorithm that comes up with these ratings that includes a pretty inclusive of your entire history of playing. Down here, you can see your win percentage and your overall record and your trophies and your the championship trophies and things that you've won, the number of teams you've played in, a whole host of information. So if you want to go check on your performance as you go, and or check on the performance level and detail of your opponent, you can do that in Yahoo. At doing an after-action review, I think, is important. Something that I showed you earlier on the category scoring tracker that I developed, that's part of my after-action review, is by tracking my weekly averages. I can come up with an end-of-season totals or averages for my teams and deliver information like I did about the 2022 season in this session. So anything that you can do to keep decent, good records, to do an after-action review is important to think that out now while you're playing the season so you can develop systems to track that stuff. I don't do a whole lot of that other than, like I said, I track those categories. A lot of the data that you can use to make assessments in season are already embedded in a part of the Yahoo platform. Tracking these categories is not something that I can easily do, at least that I found within the app. So that's why I created something outside of it. I try not to create very many things outside of the app because then it makes it less efficient, less organized. But anyway, develop some way to do a review at the end of the year of how you did, and record that so it's available to you next year. Because if you do it at the end of the season, and if you track during the season and keep tabs on what your strategies and goals are and track data to try to achieve that, at the end you'll have a good data to do an assessment with, record it, and have it ready as a historical document to review before you start in the next season of play. And so with that being said, that has covered all of the BadAzz sessions, concluding here with the episode 4 on in-season play. It's been a pleasure to be on here tonight, to be able to cover this subject with you. I hope you find that it improves your play in fantasy baseball, and I wish you the best of luck in this season. Remember, if you choose to be a dumbass and not take on any advice of professionals out there, either on podcast or the wealth of experts out there, then, if you don't take that kind of advice and stuff and look into it to become better, I think that road to getting better will be a lot longer. So I hope this helps. I hope that you can reach out to other fantasy baseball information providers out there in their podcast, because all of it together will make you a lot better player. So without further ado, my name's Rudy, and I've been your host for the BadAzz Session episode 4. I hope you have a great week and a great season this year. Catch you on the live streams each Sunday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. And with that being said, I'll say good night and the best luck to all of y'all. Take care. Goodbye.